welcome to part 2. I'm just waiting for Julian to click on. Julian going deep. There's some dog barking, isn't there? Wah, 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 wah. Hey, Friday night. As he clicked on it, what's it doing to me? Leaving me hanging. Here we are, pop, pop, bang. Yeah, so you were saying, Julian, if Conor Benn don't fight Eubank will have to fight Beefy, won't he, a third time? Could public buy into that?
I don't know if the public would buy into it. I don't mind a trilogy. And I do think, whether it's sour grapes or not, I do believe that both Eubank Jr. and Liam Smith have both got a legitimate reason why they lost each fight. You know, it was so weight drained was Eubank Jr. and coming off the downer with the Conor Benn thing. And Liam Smith, I watched it again last night. It's the second time I watched the second fight. And he wasn't at the races at all. He really did have problems with his balance. I don't like excuses, but he was going over on his feet and he wasn't at the races. He looked sharp in the dressing room on the pads, but his feet were bending over. It was bizarre watching how he was trying to shake his feet out. And I don't know. Most people might not want to see a third fight, but this is going to sound ridiculous based on the domination from the last fight. But look at what happened in the first fight. I still don't think we've got a decisive winner between the two. I don't, because there's so many question marks around those first two fights. So whilst I'm in a minority, you know, I'm always in a minority. I'm fine with that. I wouldn't mind seeing those two fight again, but I'd want to see it at like maybe 163 pounds or something like that. Just 2 or 3 pounds above the middleweight limit. Yeah. I still think you get a cracking fight.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think Eubank would beat him, but I don't think Smith's as bad as he looked in that second fight, and Eubank's definitely not as bad as he looked in the first fight. It's just, it happens, doesn't it? You know, for fighters to be at their absolute best and to perform at the best, all the stars need to align, don't they? They really do. And I know I've had several championship camps with fighters, and you do get injuries, you do get concerns, you do get worries, and you do get camps where your fighter's just not performed in sparring, he's not looked great, he's been dropped maybe once, and you're worried about various things. It happens, mate. I don't think anybody else wants to see it, by the way. I'd watch it again. I'd have no issue as well, because it's domestic level fighting, and realistically, there's not a case, is there, for Eubank Jr. and Liam Smith to become world champion?
No, but what if Smith won, Reem won third one? Where Eubank be?
Yeah, you can't have a fourth fight, can you? Clearly not. But if you just think of I can't help but get the 70s, 80s head on. But if you think of Minter and Finnegan and Simpson and all these fighters, you know, it was not unusual for them to fight each other several times, was it? Who were the light heavyweights? Was it Tom Collins and Dennis Andrews that boxed about 4 or 5 times?
Yeah.
I know they weren't pay-per-view, they weren't major fights, and it was more under the radar, but I'm all right with seeing fighters on a domestic level fighting each other. I don't have an issue with that. You know me, Russell. What I have an issue with is paper belts and fake belts and, you know, all this kind of stuff. I have an issue with that. So I've got no issue with Smith fighting Eubank again. If you want to put Heffron back in there against the kid who's just beat him, I've got no issue with those fights, mate. None at all.
Yeah. Do you think that Eubank might go for Charlo or something like that to throw Ben sent off so he gets the bigger slice of cake?
He would. I'd like to see him turn Ben down for a while. I really would, based on what I said on part 1. I'd like to see that, because it's like, as I've said, right? If you want something from me, Russell, right? So you want something, you need something from me, then I'll give you that when I'm ready. That's just how life goes, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like when someone's doing you a favor, and I've had this before in my own personal life. and people ask me to do a favour for them. Could be fitting a floor or doing something, I don't know. And then they'll say, but I need you to do it here and I need you to do it on this day. And I'll turn around to them and say, listen, I'm doing you a favour. I'll do it when's best for me, buddy. I'll get someone else to do it. So I think the same thing's got to apply with the Conor Benn and Eubank fight. I mean, maybe this is just this is a thought. I'm not saying this is the case. Maybe Conor Benn really isn't the same fighter now without taking whatever he may have been taking. And maybe they want to cash out.
Maybe.
You don't know. You don't know, because what I will tell you, and I'm not sounding, obnoxious here, but I have a pretty good eye when it comes to boxing. I know I do. And these Conor Benn smashes the pads and Conor Benn smashes the bag in public workout. I don't think he's hitting that bag and those pads as hard as he was before the Eubank fight. You watch those videos. You watch him smash that bag 4 or 5 weeks before last October was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
He was really cracking that bag, mate. There was you could hear the snap. And I've been watching him really, really closely. And I asked a good mate of mine who's got a really good eye, Stuart. You've heard me talk about Stuart as a boxing coach. I says, what do you think to the? And I've sent him the shorts of Conor cracking the bag and the pads. I said, what do you think, Stuart? Just give me your opinion. I'm not going to try and influence you. What do you think? And Stuart said, he's lost some of his power, mate. He says he's just lost some of his power. He says that nastiness, that explosiveness on the end of the shot is not there. It just doesn't look the same to me. So they might know that, Russell. They might know that he doesn't have that much time to buy. They might think, actually, without what he might have been taking, maybe he's not the same fighter, so maybe they want to cash him out.
Well,
why not pursue welterweight? Why not pursue world titles at welterweight?
Yeah, maybe he might think he might lose to Eubank, but he'll get a lot of money.
I mean, well, exactly. I mean, Manny Pacquiao was a brilliant fighter. No one's disputing Manny Pacquiao. But as soon as they started really talking about the drugs rumours, and we have to say that Pacquiao was never had an adverse finding. But once they started talking about, if you remember, Manny Pacquiao moved up, didn't he? And he was blasting everybody out. And then, obviously, he beat Oscar De La Hoya. He jumped up several weight divisions, beat De La Hoya. And then, look at what he did to Ricky Hatton and Miguel Cotto. Miguel Cotto was a big, strong welterweight. And Manny Pacquiao, he really did a number on him, didn't he? He smashed him to pieces. I've not seen Cotto beat up like that for a long time. And then all the rumours really started about Pacquiao, didn't they? Floyd was putting salt on the wounds, and people were really starting to say, how can a fighter who started his career as a flyweight at 8 stone, how is he moving up through the divisions and still knocking people out with chiller KOs? Because this generally doesn't happen. Generally, you lose a little bit of your power as you move up through the ranks. Even the big punchers like Thomas Hearns, when he moved to middleweight and light heavyweight, if you look at Thomas Hearns' career against middleweights and light heavyweights, that the knockout ratio, the early KOs weren't there, because you lose a little bit of something. Roberto Duran moved up, didn't he? Roberto Duran was a killer at 9 stone 9. And at welterweight, it wasn't quite that killer. And at light middleweight, it was a boxer. And at middleweight, Duran couldn't punch at all. But if you look at that, okay, and then you look at Manny Pacquiao, when he moved up, he was knocking everybody out until the rumours really started focusing, and you started seeing the photographs of his jawline 3 years ago to today. And then all of a sudden, what happened with Manny Pacquiao? He stopped knocking people out, didn't he? He stopped knocking people out. He was going 12 rounds, time after time after time after time. So whilst I was a Pacquiao fan, I have to say that there's something quite unsavoury about Manny Pacquiao. So what I'm saying, Russell, is there is a pattern when fighters, I believe, start taking performance-enhancing drugs. And there's one heavyweight I'm not going to mention who suddenly isn't looking like this knockout killer at the moment. And I wonder if that's because things are just getting a little bit too risky. Because if we believe that there are fighters out there who aren't knowingly cheating, we're on rubbish, aren't we? We're on button moon. We know that a lot of them are doing it. They're just getting the cycles right. They're getting the right advice, and they're only fighting once or twice a year to get around it. And I'm wondering if Conor Benn's going to be this destructive animal that he looked in his last two fights. And I don't think he is. And my eye tells me he's not going to be.
Why have they all got these foreign licenses? Is that so they can hide behind stuff? Because Dylan White's got one, hasn't he?
It doesn't make any sense, does it? I don't know if it's sometimes fighters, I mean, the British Boxing Board of Control, whatever we say, that the safety regulations in terms of the medical and the brain scans and everything else is first class. You can't doubt the safety of that aspect of it. But what I do know with a lot of other licenses, like Maltese licenses, Lithuanian licenses, they're not quite as robust as the British Boxing Board of Control. And Robert Smith will tell you that, because Robert Smith will say we are amongst the safest in the world where boxing's concerned. So to answer your question, I'm wondering if some fighters get international licenses because they might not pass a board license. I'm speculating here because I do know one fighter in particular, mentioning no names, and you know I don't do this bullshit thing, who wore glasses and didn't have great eyesight, but he got an international license. He got a license from a lesser body than the Boxing Board of Control. And I wonder how he got licensed, because his eyes weren't great, let's put it that way.
Jesus.
Honestly, mate, I've been in the sport for 20 years, a license holder. Dirty, mate. Dirty. It's grubby.
Yeah. Well, what I can't understand with this Conor Benn situation is, why don't you just go for Crawford or one of them top dogs if he's that highly ranked or that highly thought of?
Fight Boots Ennis. Fight
one of them
Virgil
guys.
Ortiz.
Keith Thurman. If you fought him, I'd be impressed.
I'd be impressed with anybody really who's a name that we know, who's a solid, durable welterweight, who's got some power, because we know he's been avoiding punches. We've said this before, haven't we? Conor Benn avoids punches like Campbell Hatton, different level, albeit. And when fighters avoid punches, it's because they're generally the people looking after those fighters know they don't have great chins. They know that. So we know why he's not fighting those guys, mate. We know why he's not fighting them. And if I'm proved wrong, and he is this killer that he was a couple of years ago, and he's clean, and he starts banging everybody out, and he becomes world welterweight champion, hey-ho. But I'm not convinced, mate. I'm not convinced by Conor Benn at all.
No. You're not the only one, mate. He's not done it traditional route, has he? I can understand flashing out jewellery on cars off if you're world champ. But he's like one pop idol in reverse, hasn't he?
Yeah, there's a good way of putting it, a really good way of putting it. There's ways to do things, and we've said this before, right? Okay, so you'll always give your children a hand up in life, won't you? That's what we do as parents.
Yeah.
And, if Conor Benn can get an easier start in his professional career because he's called Conor Benn, that's fine. But it's still a dangerous sport. You got to admire anybody who gets in the ring and risks his life. But the way they've propelled him now, even more since the October, since the fight was thrown out, he's become almost this massive name, hasn't he? Like, massive name. The press, they say there's no such thing as bad publicity. Well, there can be, but he's almost become this huge name.
On Piers Morgan, aren't they? That were a masterstroke, wasn't it, for PR? Good or bad?
Huge. I've seen Conor Benn on the little shorts online. He's been at the last 4 or 5 big shows, hasn't he? Certainly the last 2 or 3 big shows he's been at. There weren't Matchroom shows, there were Sky shows, whatever. He absolutely gets mobbed. Conor Benn is getting mobbed. Usually young people, to be honest, and Gareth A. Davis tried to mob him, didn't he, with a microphone, but generally Conor Benn gets mobbed. He's a huge name, mate. He's a huge name, and what's his best win?
Okay, I don't know. Algeria.
2 year on sofa, wasn't he, with his pipe and slippers,
Microphone.
Algeria.
Yeah, how it's panned out for him. I mean, they're bound to come out and it's smelling of roses. They're from Essex, aren't they?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I'm telling you, mate, there'll come a time when they miscalculate an opponent. They'll miss if it's not Eubank. I don't know what avenue they'll take, but there'll come a time when they get it wrong, and he gets absolutely exposed. He'll get exposed so badly.
Yeah, well, playing pantomime villain, you know what I mean? So he's not bothered, is he?
No, he's not bothered. He's going to make a hell of a lot of money, and for every one person like you or I who won't cross the road for a selfie with him, there are 500 people who would, mate.
Yeah. Steffi put a post out about taking a 15-year-old to fight in Mexico as a pro. My argument with it is, what if she fights somebody who's 30 and gets filled in?
Right. So first of all, just answer me a few questions. I genuinely, my son sent me, or my nephew Casey sent me on a group I'm on, and he said, "What do you think to this 15-year-old? Have you heard about her? Is she any good?" And I'd never heard anything. I think it was a tweet that Steffi put out, or someone on Facebook or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And is she British?
I don't know. I haven't read it. I don't know full fact.
I just wondered, is she? I didn't know if she was a Mexican national who was found away in Britain, and Steffi's going to take her for a pro debut in Mexico because Mexicans can turn over when they're quite young.
Yeah, but Isarlo was stooping here, man, to get.
Well, let's put it this way, right?
I don't agree with it, me.
Let's put it this way, right? 15-year-old is too young to go professional in a contact sport. I think most sane people would agree that. But what people are missing, right? The talk about this, and I've not heard too much about this story, by the way, but people talk about Mexicans turning pro at 15 like it's a good thing because they're as hard as nails. And they'll tell you about Canelo was 15. They'll tell you Pepino Cuevas was 13. They'll tell you Wilfred Benitez was 14 when he turned pro. They'll always tell you about the good luck stories about the guys who made millions and became world champions. What they won't tell you is about the hundreds and hundreds and thousands of Mexicans at 15-year-old, 14-year-old who are going professional and getting exploited and getting badly hurt and getting used. They won't tell you about that. There's a simple question for everybody who's going to start talking about this girl, whoever she is. Why do people turn pro at 15 in Mexico?
To feed themselves, probably.
To eat, mate. To eat, exactly. We don't do it over here because we have a benefit system. We have a system, supposedly, that doesn't allow children to have to fight to earn money. So whenever anybody glorifies this Mexican machismo, like it's a great thing that people are turning pro at 15, I'll say this, and I'm not aiming this at Steffi. I'm making a statement on a 15-year-old going professional in a combat sport. I think it's child abuse. Now, that's my opinion. I'm entitled to it.
And fighting adults.
It's child abuse, exploiting someone for money who's 15. You don't do it. You don't do it. Do you know what? If you really, I don't know who this girl is. I don't know the relationship with who. I don't, she's British. I have no idea, right? If you come across someone who's a precocious talent at 15, because there are amateurs out there, 13, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids. If you really care for that person, instead of trying to set some kind of record, some kind of world record, and as the youngest female boxer on whatever, just because it looks bloody good on social media, if you really care for this person, keep her amateur and get her a first-class education. Put her through college, put her through university, encourage that she still continues to box. And then when she's old enough, maturity-wise, you know, because a 15-year-old's a child, that's a child. When she's old enough to make a decision that actually I do want to be a professional fighter, then you let her do that. But at least she's got something to fall back on.
Yeah, let's hope that
Am I sounding like someone who's got 2 daughters at university, mate?
Well, let's hope that Steffi just put it out as an idea and that he didn't go through with it.
It might have been a joke. I don't know. I've not. I just know that Casey, my nephew, sent me it, and he says, "What do you make of that? Have you heard anything about her?" And I didn't even bother googling. I didn't know. I says, "Well, I know Steffi Bullies. I've met
He
Steffi
tagged
several
Eddie
times."
in, didn't he? Tagged
Oh,
Eddie.
it was a picture. It was a picture with Eddie. I'm sure Eddie will just have millions of pictures with a million amateur
Yeah.
boxers, don't they? You know, the guy's not. There's no suggestion that Eddie Earn's trying to turn a 15-year-old professional, is there?
No, they won't. No, I bet Eddie ain't happy that he tagged him in because I
Well,
would.
let's give Eddie a bit of credit because I think Eddie's certainly got more scruples than that. We give him a hard time, but come on. Steffi, I've met you before.
Yeah,
We've always got on. It's a really bad idea, mate, if you wanted to take a 15-year-old to Mexico for a professional fight. I don't care how good she is. Get her an education, put her through college.
definitely weapon at weak behaviour, that lad. Uh, Wardley, David Adelaide, getting at it. What do you make to all that? Intense beef or fake beef?
Based on what I've seen, it did kick off. I mean, is this the chief support for the Fury and Garno fight? This is on Dubai, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's be honest, because it's on such a massive bill, they don't really need to publicise the fight, do they? They don't need to worry
Not
about
really.
they don't need to worry about selling tickets, do they? So this is the type of thing. People are already going to buy this show because this is Tyson Fury. People will buy this show to watch Tyson Fury against anybody. The Chisora fight proved that. So what I'm saying is, I suspect it was a legitimate altercation, Russell. I think whatever history they've got, I've got no idea. But they don't need to sell that fight because let's be honest, that's a great domestic fight. We don't get enough of them, do we?
No.
It's a really good domestic fight. It's a 50-50 fight on paper. I think I slightly lean towards Fabio, but it's a 50-50 fight on paper. It's a good domestic fight. They're going to get well paid over there. They're going to be in the spotlight. They're going to get treated like kings. So they don't really need to do anything to sell that fight. So instinctively, it's a bit like Michael Benton and Herbie Hyde and Kayla and Christie. I think there's a genuine dislike for each other, and whatever kicked off. And 99% of this crap we see is staged. John Fury's is as staged as it gets. But I think it was probably legitimate. Yeah. I think both fighters were really pumped and vexed, weren't they?
Yeah. It's Big Freeze has popped up and he's had a dig at Wardley for getting dropped.
Right.
It's Big Freeze.
I'm gonna say this, and you know I've always liked Fraser Clark in terms of his personality and how he comes across. You have no right to comment on Fabio Wardley, Fraser Clark, because you pulled out, you didn't want to fight him. Shut up about him, because you're embarrassing yourself now, trying to find reasons to have a go at him. You had your opportunity to put your right hand in Fabio Wardley's mouth, and you turned it down because you weren't ready, and you insisted on fighting the likes of Wack and Dave Allen. My God! So you've had two bum fights, and you're not in the mix. No one's talking about you, so you're just trying to troll them to get the attention on yourself. So disappointing behaviour, Fraser Clark, if that is the case.
You should have seen the outfit he had on. It's getting like it's getting like he looked like Daddy Cool.
I didn't see it, mate.
It's
It's
getting like
disappointing,
wrestling,
isn't
isn't it?
Do you think he's a right to criticise Fabio Wardley? Come on.
Not after that performance again. Hey, listen, he nearly got disqualified against the Rhino.
Him and the Rhino, that was like Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, wasn't it? It was bad as it gets, wasn't it? It was do you know what?
Would you say you were white collar level, Julian? That?
Yeah, that was white collar boxing. Unbelievable for an Olympian. That was white collar level. That would have made a nice little show in Donny somewhere.
That race course.
With a Donny Racecourse with an £100 VIP ticket and some 3-course meal, a bit of chicken and gravy and Yorkshire pudding, strippers, comedians, and that fight as main event. That's how good that fight was. It was bloody awful, mate. It reminded me of I always think about this when Reg Guttridge did this classic line when Funzo Banjo. Remember Funzo Banjo?
Yeah.
It was fighting some American, and it was a dreadful fight. It was like it was honestly, it was such a bad fight. And Reg Guttridge just said he didn't speak for about 2 minutes. He couldn't even commentate. It was that bad. And Reg says, "It's times like this, Jim. You just want to say, 'Come back, Joe Bugner. All is forgiven.'" And it made me chuckle, did that one when Reg were funny. And I thought it's a good old line. And Dave Allen and Big Phrase, it was as bad a fight as I've ever seen in my life. And people on about a rematch. God, we shouldn't have even had the first match, should we? Well, it was awful.
Oh,
And that's why
Dennis will losing his mind going on about a rematch.
oh dear.
Dennis, your head's gone.
Skill level was yeah. You know when you know how badly you're performing when you land about 3 punches in 6 rounds and you're desperate for a guy to hit you in balls because you want him thrown out. When you're praying for that guy to hit you in balls one more time. And then he pulled out, didn't he? And he says, "Oh, first he was like that, wasn't he? Like shoulder." And then he was like doing that with his thing. And then he was like that with his ear. And I don't think he could decide what his injury was. What was he? It was like he couldn't decide what his injury was. It was bad. I think worse than Dave Allen bailing out was Fraser Clark's inability to deal with what he had in front of him. I thought it was bad, mate. I thought it was Funzo Banjo against the American all them years ago. That's who that was.
How do you think Dennis's appeal's going to go on for a rematch?
Dennis appealing for a rematch. I want part of my pay-per-view back. I'm going to appeal against Sky, putting that dross on in my front room. I paid 20 quid for that, Dennis. You owe me a tenner, mate. I want 10 quid off you if you're going to put that on. Rubbish. It's rubbish. And I like Dennis, but it's rubbish. It's garbage. That's not a pay-per-view fight, that. Rubbish.
Well, Chief Support.
I don't know what it was.
Where does Dave Allen go from here?
That one, Chief Support, mate. That were income support. That was awful, mate. Terrible.
Where does Rhino go now?
He's a character, isn't he? So, but he's not going to get whatever he got paid for that. You can half that for his next fight if he's an opponent, and then you can half it again. There comes a time, doesn't there, that it's like what happens with certain fighters. They become a risk, don't they? Yeah. You say, I'm taking. I'll tell you who was a good example of this was the heavyweight who Anthony Joshua stopped in 3 rounds. Was it Molina?
Yeah.
And then Eddie had him on a couple of times, didn't he? And each time Molina's performance got progressively worse. Remember? And I think it was actually Fabio Wardley, and he bailed out after a couple of rounds. I might be wrong. It might be a different fight. And Eddie Hearn said, "I'm not going to have him on one of my shows again." Even Eddie Hearn's like, Molina's a risk because he don't like to have a fight. He's very rarely in shape. And he always looks for a way out. So Eddie says, "I'm not going to use Molina again." Well, that's the risk you've got with Dave Allen, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's hot and cold, generally more cold than hot these days. And you've always going to have a risk of him spoiling, putting in a non-effort and bailing out. So would you risk him on a TV show against your rising star?
I don't know, no, maybe. But he puts bums on seats, doesn't he? So they say.
Don't know.
What about Big Freeze? Where does he go now?
Like I said, I was not a fan of the boxer, but I liked Clark. But I was so disappointed when he didn't take the Fabio Wardley fight. I thought after building it up and then just pulling out the purse bids, I thought you're lacking ambition. You got to get a move on. You know, you're 30, 31.
32 now.
You know, he's been around amateur scene bloody forever, hasn't he? You know what I mean? He really has been around. He's been around it longer than Mick Jelly. He just he's been around forever, hasn't he, Fraser Clark? And it's like, and then you look at his last two fights, and neither opponent could he really get out of there. And those opponents were not great opponents. Don't care who they boxed and what they've done. And people say, he's done this, and you know, he fought him and he fought Ortiz, and it's about now, isn't it, Russell?
Yeah.
It's about how good his opponents were now. So Vac and Dave Allen right now are not great opponents, and he still looked awful. They still look terrible. So where does he go? It's a good question, buddy. I think he might get to European level. He might win a Commonwealth belt. He might win a British belt if you know, the winner of Adelaide and Wardley move on. He might get a vacant British belt, but I'm not sensing he's going to crack the top 15 in the world at all. I don't mean one of those lunatic organisations won't give him a number 15 ranking. I'm on about truly being a top 15 heavyweight in the world. I can't ever see that.
You mean Ring Magazine top 15?
Yeah, a proper top 15, and not a chance. Not a chance.
No. Do you think it's his size? 6'6", 20 climb?
He's too big, isn't he? He doesn't look great in a pair of shorts. Not every heavyweight does. I understand that, but there's something about. I said this before. There's something about he looks. He's just pretty good at everything, but not very good at anything. He doesn't crack, does he? He doesn't look to have numbing power. He doesn't look to have great speed. His defense is pretty poor. Dave Allen only threw 3 right hands. Stevie Wonder would have seen them coming, and he still caught Fraser Clark with the right hands he threw, didn't he? Big white collar over and right hands, and he still landed them. So Fraser Clark's defense isn't that good. He doesn't seem to have gears. He doesn't seem to have variety. I'm being harsh tonight, aren't I? You know, when I say I'm being harsh, we're talking about him, aren't we? As I always say this, as an Olympian. So when we talk about
we expect more from an Olympian, don't we?
So we have to put him how he would want to be talked about.
Which if you look at the other side of the coin, would he be better off if you put him in with some proper Europeans and like see him tested then? Do
you know what I do? Really,
he's just going to drown, isn't he, with these sort of opponents, isn't he?
Yeah. He's going to be one of those, isn't he? He's going to put everybody off him before he even gets to fight anybody, and there'll be no demand, and he'll just be floating around.
He'll go stale, won't he?
I'd just genuinely, I'd chuck him in with someone who's pretty decent. I'd just roll the dice and say, look, right, it's not happening. You know, you've not really been impressive at all throughout your professional career. You've fought some pretty poor opposition. Now, we're going to give you an opportunity. And you fought the best fighters in the world as an amateur. So, you know, I'd put him in with a Jared Anderson or someone like that. Just throw him in, see what happens. Because this working pro, this what we keep hearing about AJ and everybody else. Oh, he's a working pro. We're not seeing that with other elite amateurs from the lower weights, are we? Nobody was saying Lomachenko was a working pro when he turned professional, was he? No. You've got all these really good kids who have been about the World Series boxing and had dozens and dozens of international fights at elite level as an amateur. They're leapfrogging, aren't they? They're leapfrogging right into the big fights. You know, they're leapfrogging into, I know it's a different level, but look at the kid who Matchroom have signed. What's he called? Cruz. Andy Cruz.
Yeah.
I mean, bloody hell, look at the skill set on Andy Cruz. It's unbelievable. But people always seem to say with British Olympians, he's a working pro, you know. I mean, look at Joshua Boatse. The guy's been professional 7 years and he's fighting at this level. Come on. So this would be me with Fraser Clark. I genuinely would. I'd say, look, I'm gonna put you in a meaningful fight against another kid who's unbeaten. And you'll sink or you'll swim, mate. But I can't be waiting around forever for you to look good. It's not like a young kid who turns pro coming through the VIP shows, non-TV. He's got all the time in the world to develop. You now have been in the public eye for years, hasn't he? In the ABAs, in the Olympics, in the Commonwealths. He's been around forever as Fraser Clark.
32-year-old now.
32, mate. Come on, get a bloody move on.
Yeah. Is he in danger of being an Audley?
Yeah, I think that's his level. There are also fighters out there, and Aldi was a really good exponent of the amateur system of that time. So he was rangy. He was doing that fencing with the 1-2. It was when they had head guards when Aldi won in Sydney, and it was a point scoring. And Aldi was a great exponent of what was required at that time to be successful. There's a heavyweight, and Fraser Clark seemed to be able to hold it together, didn't he, for 3 rounds most of the time at a certain level. But when it comes to the transition to professional boxing, his skill set's all wrong. And it's not going to happen, mate. It's not going to, I think, I never thought I'd say this, but I do. I think he pulled out against Fabio Wardley. I think Fabio Wardley would have just taken him apart.
Yeah, there.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting he's a future world champion. I don't know, but what he has got, he's got some good feet, some good hands, and he's got a good sort of attitude when he gets in the ring. He's spiteful. I like to see a spiteful fighter. This is professional boxing. This is brutal. I like to see fighters with spite, and I don't think Fraser Clark's got any spite. And Audley never did have, really, did he? It was just, he only ever showed spite once against Sprott when he was a mile behind, but Audley never really had that spite. And it just shows it's not all about skill set, Russell. Look at Martin Rogan beating Audley Harrison. I mean,
Big Rogan.
In a million years, should a guy with about a tenth of Audley Harrison's skill set, should he have ever beaten him? No. But it's not professional fighting differently. 4-rounders, 3-rounders, it's nothing. When you're doing 10 rounds and 12 rounds, it tests that. It tests that. And it's a different thing. And he doesn't have the temperament for me for professional fighting. He doesn't seem to have that nastiness that's required. Dave Allen was trying to get a disqualification win over, a real dangerous live heavyweight. Can you imagine a George Foreman when he were coming up and coming? Dave Allen trying those tactics. Foreman would have tried to take his head off, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
And Fraser Clark just looked like he was panicking. That's not a future world champion, mate.
Fraser's like a big cuddly teddy bear, isn't he, really? We like it's Big Freeze, don't we?
I like him. I think he's I loved how he was honest.
He's not
about
a killer, is he? He's a softie, isn't he? Mr. Softie.
He's definitely a nice. There's nothing not to like about him, is the opposite what I was saying about Conor Benn. He's funny, he's nice, he's friendly. When you see him, like I say, if he knocked on my door, Big Fraser, I'd say, come and have a cup of tea, mate. He's a nice guy. I just don't think he's anywhere near going to be a future heavyweight champion of the world, and nowhere near.
No.
Still had an amazing amateur career, and he's still achieved more than most fighters ever will. So you got to give him credit. But to repeat the same point, we're talking about him in the context of being a future heavyweight champion of the world, like we do most Olympians.
Yeah, Eddie won't that warm on signing him, will he?
I think he'll have known. Eddie's got people in the gyms, and he'll have had people who know people over in Sheffield, and they'll have known his limitations. Even though he's a successful amateur, they'll have known his limitations, and they'll have said to Eddie 2 things. If he's not really got that development, can he sell tickets? Has he got a big following? And I'm not sure he's got either. Have you?
Neither. I think it's Skid Row.
What does Eddie do with him? Whereas Ben Shalom will have him, because Ben's desperate for anybody with a name we recognise, isn't he?
Yeah. You want to go to part 3, pal?
Let's do it, buddy.